Welcome back. In this video, we're going to talk about and configure SXP between two Trustsec-capable devices. In a previous video, I likened SXP to BGP propagating routes across a WAN, or in this case, it would be propagating IP to SGT mapping across a non-Trustsec-capable environment. In the previous video, I had switch 1 and switch 2 directly connected, and I had the network device admission control configured. Well, in between that video and this video, I inserted a third switch in between them, which is my Catalyst 9300, and it's currently not configured for Trustsec. So let's imagine this is a WAN, or this is just a non-Trustsec capable device in general, maybe a third-party switch. How do we propagate the IP to SGT mappings across that non-Trustsec capable device? Well, that's where SXP comes in. So I'm going to go ahead in this configuration, configure switch 1 and switch 2 to communicate with each other via SXP. First, I'm going to go ahead and sign into ISE. So previously in my policy sets, I had it configured to download downloadable ACLs. So we're going to go ahead and change that by adding security group tags on some of the authorization results. So right now I'm using the security demo wired close policy set. So let's go ahead and go to authorization policy. I'm just going to add some different security groups. I'll leave the downloadable ACLs because whatever the security group policy is, that will override whatever the actual downloadable ACLs are. So let's go ahead and put this in. So I'll just do admin, vendor, and I haven't created a computer tag, so I'll just put guest for now. And quarantine systems on the default policy, and click save. Now I'm not looking to enforce based off this policy yet because we haven't configured the Trustsec matrix, but I just want an actual tag to be downloaded to the switch when something authenticates. So let's go over to switch 1 really quickly and sign in. So I'm just going to take a look at my interfaces. I believe there's a couple network access devices that are connected between port 40 and 48, which, yeah, some of them are IoT devices, some of them are actual PCs. I haven't configured the ports themselves for 802.1x, so I'm going to go ahead and take the time to do so right now. Again, I don't really care about them getting access right now. I just want to see successful authentications and then a security group tag delivered as part of the authorization result. So I know for sure I have a Windows 7 PC on port 47, so I'm going to unshut that port, and since I'm signed in with an existing user, I should see something delivered as far as a security group tag. So let's do a show authentication session interface gigs 1/0/47 details. And yeah, as you can see, server policies have delivered an ACL and an SGT value of 6. So the next thing I want to show you is the IP to SGT mappings that are showing in the switch and the source for them. So to do so, we're going to do show CTS, not provisioning, sorry, role-based SGT map all. As we can see from the output, there are two IP to SGT mappings. First one would be internal, which is the one that's learned for the device's security group tag itself, and then the other one was dynamic, as you can see, local. That's the 10.1.100.105. As we learned in a previous video, there's a priority to how these are learned. Internal is first, and then local is second. And that's how we can check the source also, where these were learned from. So 10.1.100.75 is the actual switch's IP itself, and the SGT tag of 2 is the Trustsec device tag. Let's go ahead and pull up switch 2. It should have the same configuration we left it at with the last video, but it's not getting any IP to SGT mappings or any inline SGTs anymore because it's no longer directly connected to switch 1. Instead, it's now separated by a non-Trustsec-capable device. So if I do a show CTS role-based SGT map all, I'm going to show nothing. except for the device SGT, which is internally found. So to start out, before we configure SXP, there's a couple things I need to configure really quickly. There's a Windows 7 host hanging off of port 23, so I'm going to configure my 802.1x configurations on it. And as I said, I left this at the previous configuration we had in the last video, which means it's not even configured with a radius server, since it's not doing NDAC. So the thing I'll have to do really quickly is I want to do a show run AAA on the other switch for switch 1, and I'm going to copy that configuration over to this switch. So show run AAA, and I'll just grab all of this. And paste it in. We can see that the pack was successfully provisioned, so that's perfect. So let's go ahead and enter our CTS credentials, which our ID will be switch 2, and the password will be ice cold. And let's make sure that we got our pack from Pink Fluffy Ice Bunnies. Perfect. And let's see the environment data. So we see the server, we see the security group tags. Perfect. And I'm going to shut and unshut some ports. So clearing the terminal, let's do a show authentication session really quickly. And we see port 23 is successfully authenticated via 802.1x, and doing a show CTS role-based SGT map all. We should see SGT 5 was downloaded for that host. And over on the other side on switch 1, it just sees the SGTs that are for the authentications that are directly connected. So how do we get the SGT, IP to SGT mappings over that non-Trustsec cloud? That's where we start our configuration of SXP. So I'm going to clear both the terminals really quickly just for keeping this neat. And so the configuration of SXP itself is really easy to configure. We'll do configure T and then CTS SXP enable. Then we're going to define a default password and a source interface. So the password I'm going to use is ice cold, and the source IP is going to be the only SVI I have. It's going to be 10.1.100.75 on switch 1. That's my interface VLAN 100, as you can see here. Now we're going to go ahead and put in the actual connection. So it'll be CTS SXP connection peer, and the peer's IP address is going to be 10.1.100.76. Password is whatever the default password we just configured is. Mode, now we can choose mode or peer, define which role they'll be. In this case, I'll just say local, but it can be speaker, receiver, or both, which in this case it'll be both. Then I'm going to log SXP log binding changes. So let's say you have multiple VRFs on your switch or your router, and you wanted to create the SXP connection out of a specific VRF. That's not a problem at all. Let me see if I can actually configure a different VRF on here really quickly. Probably not in the end. I'm not going to bother with doing that, but let me just show you in the SXP configuration. It's really easy. The only thing you would do is at the very end, you would put VRF and then the name of the VRF. And that's where what VRF that SXP connection would use. But again, not important for this configuration video, but just letting you know that you can see it. Now, if I wanted to see the status of the SXP connection, I use a show CTS SXP connections brief. Now let's go ahead and configure this on peer, because right now it's showing as off because we haven't configured it on the other side. So we'll do CTS SXP enable. We'll configure our default password and our source IP again. And if you have only one IP address assigned on the switch, or one SVI, then you don't really have to put source IP address in. I just do it out of habit. So the connection peer is going to be the IP address of the switch 1, password default, and same thing, local mode both. And I'm going to log binding changes again. You don't necessarily need to do that. That's optional, but I like to log that stuff. So let's do a show CTS SXP connections brief. And it should be starting to go on. As you can see, it's listening already. So let's give it a few more seconds and we should see that come up. I'm impatient, so don't mind me. Okay, it looks like on switch 1, it's on for listener and speaker. And same on switch 2. So let's issue the show CTS role-based SGT map all to see what's in our IP to SGT table now. Looks like we've learned 2 new IP to SGT mappings via SXP from our other switch. If we do the same thing on the switch 1, we should see the same thing. The 2 IP to SGT maps from switch 2 would have been sent over via SXP. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and clear out the terminal really quickly and go over a different configuration. So let's say we have a larger environment and we want to centralize our SXP connections a little bit more. Well, the good news is that if you want to do something like that, ISE itself could be the SXP peer. So instead of having switch 1 connected to switch 2, we would create the SXP connections from both switches to ISE itself, and ISE could be the source of truth for SXP. Of course, I'm diagramming it, so let me go ahead and kind of show you how that would work. To configure this, we're going to leave everything else for our previously configured SXP connection, but I'm going to remove the actual connection statement. So let's go back to switch 1 and 2 and do a show run include SXP. And we can see that configuration we just configured. So I'm going to do a no CTS SXP connection, blah, blah, blah. And I'm going to just remove that and create a new statement with the peer IP address being ISE itself. So that's 10.1.100.21 in my environment. And everything else I'll just configure exactly the same. And as we can see here, let's do brief again. As you can see, it's pending on, but it's going to say off in a few seconds. I'll go over here and configure the same thing on switch 2. I'm going to remove the previous connection statement and add one for ISE. Okay, so I'll add the new one, CTS SXP connection peer 10.1.100.21 password default mode local both. I'm just going to save this real quick, because I'm always paranoid about the power going out. So let's see the CTS connections, and it's off. And that's because we haven't configured it over in ISE. So let's swing over to ISE really quickly. Oh, actually, you know what? Before I go into this, go to Administration, System Deployment. You want to make sure the SXP service is actually turned on underneath your PSN that will be doing the connection. And in my case, I already have that configured, so I'll go back to Trustsec, or Work Centers, Trustsec, and then SXP. A couple of different things. Before I actually configure this, let me go to Settings really quickly. Settings is where we can set the default password for SXP settings. And if we wanted to publish those SXP bindings on PXGrid, we could check the box here as well. So I'm just going to put my global password as ice cold and click save. I'm not going to really worry about timers or anything. And it is going to restart the SXP service as part of changing this global password, so it might take a few more moments to get that connection started when we configure it. So let's go back to Work Centers, Trustsec, SXP, and we'll start adding our switches. So switch 1 is the first one. The IP address is 10.1.100.75. The peer role I'm going to put as both. connected PSN. I only have one PSN in my lab, so not a problem. Password is whatever the default is. There are some advanced settings if you want to change timers. I'm not going to worry about that. I'm going to keep it simple, or the KISS principle. Then we'll go ahead and add our switch 2. And that's that IP address is 10.1.100.76. Well, let me change that to peer role to both really quickly. And click Save. And it probably will take a few seconds for this to turn on because it's still probably restarting the services from when I changed the password. So just bear with me. I might speed up this video a little bit. Yeah, it's just taking a few moments, and I'm impatient, so yep, looks like it's finally on for both those switches. So let's go ahead and go back to the command line, and we should see the SXP connection on. Yep, it's on for both speaker and listener. Just checking switch 2 really quickly. Yep, connection, it looks like it's on here as well. So by using ISE, we can centrally manage, we can centrally see all of our SXP mappings, but we can also add a static IP to SGT binding, and it'll be sent over all the SXP peers. So I'm going to just go ahead and add like a random IP address. This is one is my domain controller. I'll just put it under TrustSec devices. I'll clear this out between videos, but it's just to show you. So, and I'll deploy that to all TrustSec devices. Click Save. Let's go back to SXP, and we can see our there are our SXP mappings. The one that we just created is learned by local, which is up on top. And now let's check our SGT map on our switches themselves, see if that was actually communicated down. So we'll do the show CTS role-based SGT map all. And there we have our additional IP to SGT mapping learned by SXP. And with that, we've come to the end of our video. Thank you so much for watching.